you brought up the word remigration, which I think it's fair to say was behind a cordon sanitaire, along with the author, philosopher who popularized it, at least in dark corners of the literary world. So Renaud Camus, the French philosopher, who of course is famous, perhaps infamous, for being the creator of the notion of the Great Replacement theory, which is typically banded around as a conspiracy theory to dismiss those who raise the demographic changes that are being seen across the West. I think it's fair to say that that in itself is out from behind the cordon sanitaire as well. And as you've mentioned, there are countries in the European Union and even outside of the European Union, like Switzerland and Sweden, that are now taking steps to even reverse people's citizenship if they deem them having to not be making a sufficient contribution to society. Now, I was speaking to some guests about this offline, particularly in light of the regime change that's taken place in Syria, and it's become a common talking point, and we're seeing it in Germany already, which is, okay, we've got a regime change having taken place in Syria, lots of Syrian immigrants or asylum seekers having been received by countries all over the Western world since the Bashar al-Assad regime was turning its fire on its citizens back in 2011 and onwards. And there's been talk of, well, when is it safe for them to go back? Let's make sure that happens, because asylum should not be an open-ended invitation. Anyway, the people that I've spoken to about it, off the record, as it were, whilst they have some confidence that other countries may well do this, there is little confidence, I suppose, that Britain would revoke asylum or refugee status. And I suppose this isn't just even in relation to Syria. This is the broader remigration question, which is, whilst it's popularizing everywhere else as people run the data and go, this costs an awful lot of money, we can see crime stats going in a certain direction, and generally we can see the electorate becoming unhappy with it. Can you ever see that conversation taking hold in Britain, particularly when you have a leader of Reform, who I think most people would have expected to be talking about these things, saying that he wouldn't because it would be bad optics? What do you think, even if it's done in a non-nasty, harsh way, as you were suggesting before, do you ever see that coming to Britain, or is it a case of Britain does things differently and we'll go our own way?
I do hope so. I do hope that the discourse changes on this. That I think Canada and we at the moment are in a contest to see who can be the slowest kids in the class, while we've got Donald Trump breaking the mold of American politics, winning not just every single bloody swing state that was up for grabs, but the popular vote as well, which has been considered unthinkable this century for Republicans, on a program of mass deportations, getting not only Republicans sort of reporting sort of 95% support for this policy, but as some polls show, even a significant chunk of registered Democrats saying that they support it as well. This is extraordinary. Likewise, as you mentioned, on the continent, we've had Sweden talking openly about giving immigrants inducements to leave, financial inducements to leave permanently, never to return, on the grounds that they are poorly integrated and poorly assimilated. That's particularly the case in Sweden, which only has a population of around 10 million people. Germans and the Austrians are talking about this as well. There's a sense in which the continent is necessarily going to be more prone and sensitive to public opinion, because public opinion is more immediately reflected in shares of seats that parties have in their national legislatures, because they have proportional representation. I'm not endorsing that we go down that route here for reasons which are probably too tedious for me to go into. I have spoken about them before on the New Culture Forum. If you type in deprogrammed Lewis Brackbull, who was the guest on that show, we spoke about it, and I explained to Lewis. Lewis and I had an amicable, gentlemanly disagreement about the respective merits of PR and first past the post. I'm in favour of first past the post for reasons which, as I say, I won't go into. But there's a sense in which you can understand why the continent is a bit further ahead, because there are these more immediate democratic pressures that are a function of their electoral system. I certainly hope that with enough pressure, some of these concepts can start to be mainstreamed in Britain. It's going to take a greater level of ambition than reform collectively, as a party seem to be showing at the moment. However, I don't want to be too premature in writing them off as containment, or writing them off as not up to scratch and all this sort of thing. That they're as one of their MPs, who I won't name him, told me recently, it's like you're trying to build an aircraft while in midair. Like they're a startup party. They've just got their foot into the door in Westminster. They don't fully understand the system, and there's a sense in which they need, or they feel they need, and I disagree with this, but they feel that the way to succeed in British politics is to sort of, rather than focusing on consolidating the support that they already have and trying to grow that by the sheer force of what you're offering the people. There's a sense in which they feel like that professionalization means tagging to the center a little. My criticism of that is that by doing that too much, you basically invalidate the very reason for your existence as an insurgent political party, namely the desperate need that we have in this seemingly uni-party system for a radical frame-breaking alternative. And in my view, true leadership amounts to not diluting your principles so that it's like Groucho Marx says. He says, ladies and gentlemen, those are my principles, and if you don't like them, well, I've got other ones. You need to believe in your principles and make a compelling bid for people's support, particularly at a time like this, where we're going through a period of immense political, social, and cultural ferment in Britain. It's precisely at that time, that sort of time, that people's sentiments, people's political loyalties are most up for grabs. And I think that reform should have more self-confidence in the righteousness of what they're fundamentally about, which is, I think, trying to engineer some kind of restoration in Britain. And in my view, that is not going to be feasible unless, in a humane fashion, through both, in the case of criminals, forcible deportations, and in the case of non-criminals, sort of voluntary remigration, and giving them inducements to leave. Unless we do that, this kind of restoration just isn't possible, because this is another sense in which assimilation only really makes sense once you have an already very intact, confident host culture. And if, as in many of our towns and cities today, that host culture not only isn't self-confident, but doesn't exist anymore, because it has been so bulldozed by the arrival of immigrant populations. I mean, like, what is the assimilation strategy in Tower Hamlets? What is the assimilation strategy in Hare Hills and Leeds? Are you going to drop copies of John Fortescue through everyone's letterbox and hope that they get the memo? Like, it becomes a point where the demographic foundations that make assimilation possible are so radically out of your favor that it's impotent even to talk about it. And so I don't think that this restoration that reform is clearly keen to engineer and to be part of, as much as to engineer, to be part of it too, because it will be deeper than just political. It will be cultural, it will be civilizational. That's not going to happen without mainstreaming what is, I'm pleased to see, becoming fairly mainstream both in the United States and on the continent. Hopefully we can stop being the slowest kid in the class sometime soon. But it will take reform, much more gumption on the part of reform for that to happen.